Okay, this next lesson is about flourishes. A flourish is important in an explainer video because it helps keep the visual interest going. What I mean is it adds animation when there's a lull. So let's look at an example real quick.
It all starts with a project.
Did you see that line that went under the project? It helped emphasize that word. And it added a little extra. It added a little extra animation where once all the text is done animating, it allowed some more motion to be happening on screen. Okay? So that's an example of a flourish. Let's keep watching.
The designer searches through.
Okay, and did we catch that? All right, there's that little sparkle there at the end of designer. When that text was done, kind of helped highlight that. So flourishes can help highlight sections. It can help keep the pace of motion going forward.
That's the right purpose. Inspiration.
You know, we just saw one on all the light bulbs. It's also repeatable, so we could create one flourish and use it repeatedly throughout the project. So now we're going to learn about flourishes and how to make them with shape layers. We can either right-click down here and say New Shape Layer, or as long as we have nothing else selected with F2 or selecting anywhere else, anytime we use Create Shape Tool, if we click and hold this, we get a couple options here. Or if we want to draw one out with a pen tool. So what we're going to do is do a circle. We can draw it anywhere. We just need to make sure it's a little bigger than the existing one because it's going to go around the outside. Then we're going to use the align features down here to get this in the center. And shapes have two main attributes, the fill and the stroke. And right now we can see that the fill is colored green up here in the top. And we can see that there is not a stroke. So we don't want to fill, so we can actually click on the word fill to get another option box. And in this option box, we can select this red cross that will choose none, okay? And then we can choose the stroke color by clicking on the box next to the word stroke. And let's choose a yellow kind of a color. Actually, let's take the same hue and just shift it. The same saturation and brightness, just kind of shift it over. So we're in the same ballpark. Okay, and now it's really thin and I want to make it thicker. We can use the pixel stroke width right next to the stroke option here. Okay, and depending on the type of flourish you want to have, that will affect, you know, the stroke width and how you do it. So now we have the circle. Now how do we animate this? Let's go down the shape layer and call this flourish circle. And right next to add, there's a button that we can click and choose different types of effects, animated effects, okay? Let me scroll this up real quick so you can see it. And we're gonna wanna choose trim paths. This is one we're gonna use quite a bit, okay? So let's click that, and we can see that it's been added here in the layer. So we're gonna start with this not on, okay? And we're gonna go to 100%. We could also go to 0 depending on which direction we want the flourish to come from. So let's keyframe both of those, and then let's move forward in the timeline, and let's expand this out. It's as simple as that. But we also want this to go off, all right? So let's check this, move down another 8 frames, and animate that to 100. Now when we play it back, it's a little flourish, but it's kind of static again. We have these linear keyframes here. So let's see what we get when we add the easy ease. You can either go keyframe assistant down here, right clicking and say easy ease, or hit F9. So that's kind of nice, but it's kind of like 1-2, like it's on and then it's off. What if we started the off before the on finishes? Okay, so let's move the off keyframes down. It's a little bit better. Calls attention to the circle. But it kind of stops, you know, we see that it starts here, and this is in the same position throughout the entire thing. And then it hits that, at the top, and it just stays there for the rest of the flourish. What we can do to break that up is animate the offset. So let's click the stopwatch on the offset, move down in time to where we can still have a sliver left so we can see how much we're moving it. And then just slide this down. Let's do like a 90-degree move. And I'm going to leave that at linear for right now. Let's see what that looks like. That's way more interesting with that subtle movement. So we don't have any one piece of this flourish staying in the same position throughout. The other thing we could do is animate any other aspects of the stroke itself. We animate the color, the opacity, the stroke width. Let's make the end caps round so it's a little smoother. Now we can see that we went from a flat cap to a round cap. What they call a butt cap to a round cap, okay? So that adds to the smoothness a little bit. Let's animate the stroke width as well and see what that looks like. We'll go up and then down. I'm having to hit function on my keyboard just because of the way it's set up. You should be able to hit F9 if not on yours. So animating the stroke width also adds another little bit of visual interest. Something else we can do is duplicate this and change the color a little bit, maybe to white. And so right now it's the same stroke width. Let's pull up the animation by hitting U, and we can see the stroke width is the same, of course, as we've had. So something we can do to offset that a little bit is to select keyframes here and click and drag them down. By holding Shift, we'll keep them on the right time in the timeline. And we can let go, and it looks like it kind of went back to the same spot, but what this graph editor does is kind of normalize the view. So if I scroll this down, it's gonna kind of snap back to like a normalized view. So it keeps it a maximum view of what you're doing. Even though the value's going down, it'll look similar in the graph editor. But just you want to go off the numbers here. So if we drag it down, we can see we have dragged it down. Now we're down to 5 units as opposed to what we were at where it was 10 units. Okay. So now the white is showing up on the inside. So that's kind of interesting. What else we could do is offset this a little bit. What if we offset it at a few frames? So that adds just a little more interest. We could also scale this up over time so it expanded out. This is another interesting thing about nulls. Now that we have 2 circle flourishes, we can parent these two to the null and just scale this out over time. And I'm going to probably keep this linear as well. So that's kind of interesting. We can also swap the keyframes. See how that looks. It's kind of cool. So that's one way to draw interest and keep things going forward. Now we have an asset, especially with them parented to this null, we could duplicate this structure again, drag them down and then back up so they're kind of together. And then now that we have this null, we could move this effect around. We could also pre-compose this. If we had another circle over here, what would be interesting is if we pre-compose this, because if we need to scale this later, let's keep it in the middle. Normally when you pre-compose something, you want to kind of keep it in the middle of the composition. Let's select all 3 of the layers and say Layer, Pre-compose. So now we have an asset that we can duplicate a lot of times and we can move around. We can animate all of these transform attributes now without messing up any of the animation we have, like this scale. Now we can scale this up and down. We could rotate this, and now we have it all together. And this is a repeatable asset we've now created that we can use in any way that we want. So that's one flourish. Let's talk about some others. Join me in the next lesson.